Look who we got here.
Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here with two of my co-hosts. First of all, Julian Harper.
Welcome, welcome.
Second of all, Michael Graves, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience. I know it may look a little different here. We're in a different studio today because of the downtown studio. Some work is being done, so we're recording a little closer to Central Harlem, and we'd like to welcome you all and tell a friend, tell a foe that Community Cop is on. And because we're at a new location, there's going to be a new telephone number that's going to be flashed on the board, but I'll give it to those of you who want to get in early. The number for this particular studio, when we open up our phone lines, is 212-996-1314. That's 212-996-1314. And as I stated, in about 25 minutes, when our phone lines do open up, they will flash the number on the screen. So today, and today only, the old number will not work. But right off the bat, as is customary, we like to reflect on one of our congressmen, Ron Conyers, in 1889. John Conyers. Who said Ron? Thanks. John Conyers passed a bill calling for African Americans to receive reparations for the 400-year forced labor to this country, of which African Americans to date have received nothing.
And you said 1989?
1989,
oh, okay.
he put it in Congress. So far, the bill, of course, remains dormant. Michael, we'll start off with you. Whenever I hear people discuss the subject of reparations, a lot of people mock it, even in our communities. Mm-hmm. Oh, what are blacks going to do with the money if they get it? They're going to buy cars, or they're going to buy this, which is really foolishness. I think in any civil action, when you want to determine whether or not a person deserves to be compensated, the first thing you do, before you talk about what the person is going to spend it on, because once it's their money, they can spend it on whatever they want, the first thing you discuss is it deserved? Do they deserve to be compensated for some damage? What are your thoughts on this great movement? Of course, it's stalled, and reparations in general.
Well, there has been a general ebb and flow relative to the reparations movement. You see it sometimes in and out, and it's up and down. However, when you consider the fact that others have received some measure of compensation, I wouldn't call it justice, what happened to the Native Americans, even though they have been allowed to own casinos or what have you, even though it can never compensate for the loss of land, where America is theirs. And certainly when you look at what happened to Japanese Americans that lost businesses, that's a factor. And when you consider all the reparations paid to people that were Jewish, even though the Holocaust happened on foreign soil, and I don't know why America has forced Germany and other participants to compensate them. And of course they was given a land which they took from Palestinians, that Palestine now renamed the State of Israel. So I would just say within that context, we should say, well, what about us? Where all these years, as Noel pointed out, of forced labor, from us being stole and sold as cargo from the shores of Africa, throughout the Caribbean and South America and Central America, and here in North America, all those years. And so we should be compensated. So I must commend John Conyers for at least having the heart to put forth the bill. And then U.S. Senator Obama was able to support him. He was supportive of the bill as a state senator and as a U.S. senator, but strangely enough, he no longer supports that action.
Well, I'm gonna have to, agree with Michael, but I'm not gonna use the word stolen because that equates us to being property. I'm gonna say we were kidnapped, and I think that when they talk about reparations, no one else was questioned. No other group was questioned what they were going to do with the money, and I concur with Noel. Is it deserving? And I think that that's where the conversation has to start and end. But, you know, when we start talking about black folks receiving their just dues on any level, that conversation is always silent. I think that we have to continue to sound the horn and make sure that our voices are constantly and continuously heard.
And one of the most diabolical holocausts known to mankind that happened to our ancestors to date has gone on unresolved. And some of the issues that we talk about later on and some of the things that we experience in this country and throughout the globe is a direct result of that 400-year Holocaust. And there's no commemoration by this government to something that happened in this country, on this land. You know, it's as if, you know, white America once, you know, has a case of amnesia. They just want to forget about it. Mm-hmm. And don't forget, our people have been enslaved in this country way longer than we've been out of that particular condition.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. You know, and we cannot, forget that what happened 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, 6 minutes ago affects what happens 6 minutes from now, 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, and 6 months from now. And I can never rationalize why so many white Americans have such utter hatred for African Americans. It's almost as if we enslaved them for 400 years. It's almost as if our ancestors kidnapped theirs and lynched them and Jim Crow, that all of these diabolical actions that have been thrown out on us by their ancestors. It's almost as if the tables were turned. You know, it's unbelievable. Closing comments on reparations, that's it. Okay, issue number one. We're going to go straight to the case of Temery Rice, the 12-year-old boy that was shot by a police officer. The district attorney is considering pressing charges. The investigation has been concluded. Just as a lot of these horrific police shootings throughout the nation, some of which we'll discuss today. Michael, what are some of your thoughts on the way this case is going to go?
Well, from the outset, I would say that this took much too long when one considers that this happened at least 6 months ago and they just completed their investigation. Homicides investigations, believe it or not, are simplistic for the most part, and it does not require 6 months. If it required 6 months for the average citizen to have that completion before charges were rendered, the courts all over America would be so backlogged it would be incredible for any semblance of justice. So the wheels of justice lag behind and take long only when this involves police officers. Does they have to be an extensive investigation because they're trying to, at every twist and turn, to exonerate the police officers. So this took much too long. And supposedly this is independent because the sheriff's departments did this as opposed to the police department. So, but at the same time, the community has enacted an old law relative to empirical data, and so they have information in the form of a videotape to show that the police officers in question lied, that they did not give three consecutive verbal commands to tell the 12-year-old to drop his weapon. They, in 1.2 seconds, shot this young man. Consequently, they lied, and it's all on tape, how they jumped out of their vehicle, military style, one on each side, and began to shoot this young man, who they were previously told that he was a child and that also it was a toy. So for that to happen and for them to lie on their report saying that he looked 21 years old is an outright lie. You can see the difference in a 21-year-old and a 12-year-old. So that empirical data they have has been given to a judge in question. And I must point out that Reverend Sharpton's attorney, Crump, the guy who did Sanford, Trayvon, and having these other cases, he did not do this. He said he has no problem with the community do it, but he didn't point out that law that the community didn't have to wait to get justice. He just won't stand in the way because he said it will not stand in the way of what he's doing, which is a lawsuit. So he's waiting for a check. He's not trying to get justice. So I have to commend the community for trying for justice.
You know, one of the things that I think we should look at, you know, the bottom line is, as a conversation we were having earlier, Noel, you know, if we look at this on its face, you know, it was a bad shooting, you know, regardless to the color of the police officer or the victim. But I'm going to have to bring in that dynamic for a moment. There is a real criminalization, dehumanization of our people when law enforcement encounters us. You know, I couldn't imagine that being a young white child playing with a gun with the same call and the same circumstances, that same response would have occurred. So we have to look at it from a racial component when we do an analysis of it, if we want to talk about the psyche of the person that was involved. But when we look at the act standing alone by itself, there was no justification for that police officer, at least in my mind, to respond that way, that quickly, with I guess causing the death of that young man. So we really have to look at it that way, and I think that if we are fair in our assessment of it, hopefully, and this is just me hoping, there'll be some real justice in this case and during the investigation.
And Julian, you bring up a good point. Although there's racial component to all of these shootings and all of these incidents, we're going to talk about the incident that happened in McKinney, Texas, where a police officer, you know, was totally out of control and acting inappropriate. But, you know, when you deal with it, whether the officer's actions were appropriate or inappropriate, regardless of the race, you know, was it appropriate or inappropriate? Because I see a lot of times the white media attempting to divert from the wrongness or the criminality of the act and try to get individuals to debate, was it racist, was it not racist? All right, you know, we can have that conversation as you stated, but was the officer's actions appropriate or inappropriate? I don't care if the child was a white child, would it still been appropriate? We know it wouldn't have happened if it was a white child, but when you start having these conversations or these debate about whether or not race was involved or race wasn't involved, and as opposed to talking about was the officer's action inappropriate, you know, it sort of throws the attention off. You know, and we'll talk about that situation now that happened in McKinney, Texas, where a group of young black teenagers were at a pool party on this gated community, and for some reason police officers were called. I know some white women were accused of saying to the kids, go back to your Section 8 housing, that you don't belong here. I know in many of these gated communities, if you live there, you have access to it, and you can even have parties there, and you can have invited guests who maybe don't live there. But the officers responded, and as you see on the tape, one officer in particular was overly aggressive, abusive. He pulled out his weapon, although his life or no one else's life, you know, according to the film, was in imminent threat, you know, because that's the criteria, at least in New York City. A police officer have to be in imminent fear of death or serious physical injury to himself or another person. So the officer's actions were inappropriate. And we can talk about the racial aspect, but if we just talk about that and debate it, then the officer will slip through the cracks and get over. What were some of your thoughts on this particular film that we see in McKinney, Texas, where this officer, I think we have a short clip. We'll look at it a few seconds for those who didn't see it, then we'll talk about it.
Yes, it's a flashlight.
It's too long.
Hey, let me give it to him. No. Hey, let me give it to him.
It's too long. Just turn it on.
No, it wasn't his. It wasn't his.
Oh, he's here.
It was his.
Hey, don't take off running the cops in here. What's up, man? I'm thinking.
It was
Some guys. One of these guys. Okay, that's what I'm saying.
It was this guy, it was that guy's.
Well, sir, get on the ground. I told you to stay. Get your ass down on the ground.
It's too long.
Now, why he's actually getting on the ground, I do not know. You know, but this, you know, as you watch. Now, I don't see any riotous kids in this particular clip. He's telling everybody, but I see some white kids across the street. He didn't ask them to sit down.
What color was it? I know where it is.
That's the thing. So right now you're staying. Don't make you fucking run around here with 30 pounds of goddamn gear on the sun because you want to screw around out here. Y'all keep standing there running your mouth. You're gonna go too.
See the girls not doing anything.
I don't care. You're leaving now. You're leaving now. You are leaving now. Leave. That way. Then get your ass going.
Need a level of disrespect. Now he grabs a female. Takes out his weapon. This, all right. This is a police officer, and this, all right. That's we got it. All right, this is a police officer, totally out of control. And what I want, for those of us who remember in Waco, Texas, when you had those white bikers, those white motorcycle drivers, engaged in violent crime, 9 people killed, they fired on police officers. If you look at the police officers' interactions with hundreds of outlaw motorcycle gangs, white males, it's totally different. I think what you see on this clip is preposterous, and we have to stop talking about it and start doing something about it. But Michael, I know you happen to be a great supporter of the Fraternal Order of Police. As a sitting board member, no, I'm just kidding. What are some of your thoughts on what you just said?
Well, from the outset, let's be clear that Case Vogt was a police officer. He's 40 years old, and he's been a police officer literally half of his life. 10 years in the Navy, police officer. 2 years state trooper, 1 year Oklahoma City police officer, and now McKinney police officer. So he's actually been in law enforcement his entire career, adult life. And so this is not a person of inexperience. And by the way, he's a corporal. He was in charge out there that day. He's a academy. He's an academy trainer. Not only that is he an instructor in the academy, but he's also a corporal. So he was the supervisor out there with those other police officers in question. He was the supervisor. Now, when he pulled his weapon, if you noticed that when he pulled his weapon, it was another fellow officer under him. He was a superior officer, but it was a police officer under him that grabbed his elbow, because he didn't know what he was going to do with that gun. So the other police officer grabbed his elbow and tugged on it. Indirectly, I don't know what he said to him verbally, but that tug was to tell him, holster your weapon. And he, even though he was a superior officer, he had to holster his weapon. Now, he straddled this young lady, if you notice the tape. He actually threw her down. She was sitting down already, but he wanted her head down in the grass. So he initially threw her down on the pavement, which was hard, and then he threw her head down again and straddled her on the grass several times, and he had his knee in her back. Now, as we witnessed and saw what happened in Baltimore, a spine was severely broken.
Look at that. She's not resisting.
And
she's
so
not pushing.
He's right now straddling her. One knee is on her shoulder, her head, and the other knee is in her back. His entire weight of his upper body. Now he has one knee. He took one knee off, but at that time he had both knees on top of her body. His entire upper body weight was on her spine. So that only shows you the insensitivity in question. And so again, this was not a new officer. He was a supervisor out there, going crazy, ballistic. And if you notice also, he did not say anything to any white person. All of his verbal instructions, although 4-letter F-bombs he threw, was all at black people. As a matter of fact, he let several white guys stand right near him, and they were not supervised or directed to do anything at all. All of his instructions were strictly at blacks. White people were invisible.
And Julian, I'm sorry, but you know, when you look at the film, I didn't see any riotous. I'm not saying they didn't happen before, but you know, if it happened before and it stopped, then you can, you know, you can calm down as a police officer. I didn't see him in a threatening situation. I didn't see the kids, you know, fighting, yelling, cussing, running, anything. So, you know, it is sort of inexplicable when I look at the white media and they attempt to condone this officer's actions were clearly, you know, unnecessary.
The way I look at it is we can take, and we had this conversation earlier, we can take color out of this whole dynamic.
Right.
We can just look at the actions of the police officer and the actions of the youth that he was engaging with. And the only person that was being boisterous, the only person that
Right.
was screaming, the only person that
Cursing.
was cursing, the only person that was grabbing and pulling and pushing was the police officer. And realistically, the actions of the other police officers around him were kind of calm relative to the way he was. So he was the main focus or the main person involved in all of the aggression that was going on at that particular time. Now, we just discussed the actions of the officer and his the way he dealt with those kids. And my personal opinion is that he was out of control, he was overly aggressive, he was abusive, he was verbally abusive, physically abusive, and could have caused some serious damage.
He took out his gun.
And could have caused some serious damage to the young girl. So there was a multitude of things that were wrong with his actions solely. Now, that was just the way he responded. Now, when I look at it, how he responded to those children because they were black, you know, because he was a white officer, now we're going to put the race involved. He had no respect for those children. I mean, just people in general. There was no respect. And as everyone stated, his response were only towards the black youth that were in that area. There were white youth that I saw who appeared to be white in that area, and there was no dialogue, there was no discussion to them. They were never told to move, never told to get their F and A's home and get out of here and all those other things. None of that was discussed or directed to them. So now we can talk about the racial component, and is that what fueled the way he responded to those youth? As I talk about the dehumanization of our community, that was a clear way of seeing someone dehumanizing our community, or a pure action, I should say.
Well, I can in no way, not even for one second, take race out of this. You know, so I disagree totally on that.
No, nobody said take race out of it.
No, I'm saying I cannot take race out of it for 1 second.
Right, nobody
because
should.
all of his rancor was at blacks. All the encirclement of whites he totally ignored. As a matter of fact, this is similar to the incident that happened the other day where the black woman, 8 months pregnant, was thrown down. She had an argument with a white woman, a disagreement over their cars. This was the same thing. Grown white women disagree with younger black women on the whole pool setting, and they only had two passes per guest. 2 guest passes were given out per person, and so maybe that number exceeded what white folks expected. Consequently, there was a disagreement. The officers weighed in on the white side. The white woman slapped the black woman in the face. So, if anything, he should have arrested the white woman for slapping her in the face. The black people said she slapped her in the face first, before there was any words exchanged. They were the ones who were saying, go back to your Section 8 housing. It all started with white women from a white perspective. So I'm just saying that race was predominant throughout the whole thing. The police officer chose enforcing strictly with black folks. All these whites were around. The person who videotaped the entire thing was a young white man. They didn't say anything to him. The host, a white man, they said nothing to him. As a matter of fact, the person who videotaped admitted that at no time was anything said to a white person. Nothing. So this is not black people saying that. The white guy said no white person was scolded, admonished any kind of way by those police officers. And those other 2 cops, they're not angels. The 2 cops that chased that young brother, when he came back hurt. When they put him on the grass, he was coughing up blood. So whatever they did it real quickly, but he got tuned up.
Now, the reason why my point was that we have to look at right and wrong by itself. Now, we're not taking the racial component out because we understand that the genesis of it is race. That's why it happened. We got that. But in order to prevent people from deflecting the criminality of what happened, we have to look at the acts of the officers and what they did. And I'm not excusing any of them. I'm just pointing out that let's look at how this aggressive officer operated. And I'm sure, and you know, anybody who was involved in anything that was inappropriate dealing with those kids have to be dealt with, and it has to be addressed on every level. I don't even care if there was a sergeant who wasn't at the scene and he let it happen. Everybody has to be addressed. My point is that let's not lose the criminality, the inappropriateness of what happened, and allow people to make us have a conversation. What's going on between blacks and whites? We know what's going on there. But let's deal with this right and wrong first, and we can also deal with the racial dynamic as well. But everybody who did something inappropriate has to be held accountable for what they've done.
And I think we all conclude that, you know, if these was a group of white girls, that it wouldn't have happened.
Exactly.
And, you know, as Julian said, you know, when he gets convicted, if he should be convicted, is because he treated that his actions was inappropriate.
Right.
If he did it to Hispanics or white, it would have been, even though we know he wouldn't do it, but it was still inappropriate and he should be prosecuted. Now, you know, I know he's been suspended, but this individual should be, you know, incarcerated. He should be tried. I mean, he pulled his gun out, and if it would have accidentally went out and the life would have been lost, they would have condoned it, attempted to gloss over it. But, you know, his actions was definitely criminal, you know, and such level of disrespect to our young people is
See the young man right there that's hurt, that's spitting up blood?
Right, that's one of the gentlemen that ran initially. All right, coming back home, Commissioner Bratton. No, we want to talk about the shootings. You know, something that happened over the past week. You know, the mayor and the police commissioner are alleging that shootings are up and maybe homicides are up slightly over last year, which was an unprecedented year in terms of the lowest amount of homicides in New York City. You know, since they've been taking numbers, but one is one too many. But they're attempting, in conjunction with the white media, to play up these shootings to try to reinstitute illegal stop, question, and frisk. They had a poll on the news saying, should NYPD start or reinitiate the stop, question, and frisk, which they never stopped. And no one says that New York City Police Department shouldn't do stop, question, and frisk. We just argue against illegal stop, question, and frisk. But we see this play up of the so-called crime statistics, even though overall crime is down. Julian, I see it as a strategy for the police commissioner in conjunction with the white media to get New York City Police Department to do more illegal stops. And you even have some individuals in our community, you know, saying, yes, cops need to do more stop, question, and frisk, which they haven't stopped doing.
You know, it's so funny. You know, we really need to talk about quality policing. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone has a problem with legal, justifiable stop and question and possible frisk. And if someone had an opportunity to explain to the masses how that's supposed to work, I think everyone would be in agreement. Like, oh yeah, if someone has committed a crime or is about to commit a crime, they look like they're about to burglarize my house, and you have reasonable suspicion to believe that they were about to do it, and you want to ask them relative to their actions, if they were involved, so you can do an investigation, nobody's going to have a problem with that. But when we talk about randomly stopping kids who are playing, walking down the street, an old woman going into her home, or someone just minding their business, doing nothing wrong, not even suspected of doing anything wrong, being stopped and searched and having their civil rights violated, then that's problematic. So let's not play with this stop, question, and frisk thing, because they're throwing it out to people who really aren't familiar with the law and know how it's supposed to operate. And I think if they had all the information that they needed, they would be able to make an intelligent decision. But I concur with you, Noel. I think this is a ploy to get people to be willing to give away or do away with their civil rights and their constitutional rights and say, listen, yeah, just stop people anytime you want. And that's going to be problematic. It is problematic. And the reality is, and I'm sure that the panel will agree, that's going to happen in the black and brown community. That's where the abuses are going to occur. It's not going to occur in Midtown. It's not going to occur to young white men and young white women. It's going to happen to people of color in our communities.
Let me just say from the outset that this is a narrative that's being controlled by white supremacists. So it's off kilter. it just throws you off to even engage in this type of conversation where white supremacists have plans that they exercise, and we take opposing sides, out of silliness, out of just whether it's internecine violence, whether it's just historical legacy, post-traumatic slave disorders that we carry with us, the scars, badges of slavery. So unfortunately, we find ourselves discussing, do we want stop, question, and frisk, or do we want broken windows? And both of them are methods of control. They're just slightly different, but the same. Now, obviously, the ability to engage in stop, question, and frisk is a valuable tool of law enforcement. It's a valuable tool when used properly. However, it is not being used that way in the black community, and we know that well. Consequently, let's just say that these white supremacists, these are all part of their machinations, and they use the tentacles to oppress our people in so many various ways. Consequently, we're engaged in the conversation of silliness. They are both methods of control to deconstruct the black community, and we should not, we should have people in place, elected officials, that should be countering this narrative with the one that reflects our bosom interests.
All right, and it's just preposterous that your police commissioner and your mayor will mislead you, and the intention is to get members in our community to call, as Julian said, for these unprecedented, illegal, unconstitutional stops, as if they're going to curtail crime. Stopping somebody not engaged in criminality, not about to be engaged in criminality, is not a deterrent to crime. Stopping criminals or people who are about to engage in criminality or might have, committed a crime, doing investigations with those individuals would bring down the crime level. So do not fall into the trap of the white media, your white mayor, or your white police commissioner who have these inclinations about how to, resolve criminal. Julian said good policing will resolve the crime, but we resolve the problem. We have open up our phone call. I see Julian looking at me. First phone caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hotep, brother.
Hotep. This police officer was totally out of control. And this same guy that was complaining about running the Texas ski with 30 pounds of equipment on him didn't have a problem doing a drop and roll. I don't know who he was trying to impress or who he was trying to scare. And now the worst thing that's going to happen to him is probably he's going to get terminated and he's going to turn up in another jurisdiction. Some of the law enforcement agencies will hire him. We've seen that before. That's how white supremacy works. But I do have a question for the panel. Number one of Detective Scarcella's conviction is overturned by D.A. Ken Thompson, and the brother was released after serving 20-some-odd years in jail. I want to know, if this Detective Scarcella be brought up on some kind of obstruction charges, because that cat needs to be locked up.
Right. All right,
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your call, caller. Anybody want to answer that?
Well, I would just say that obviously when you show that these detectives in question have consistently broke the law and engaged in criminality, and so you have to go through their entire folders, all their arrests, and subsequently people were released, you still have to do the other part to it. Now you should prosecute the police officers in question. It's not enough just to let them let certain people go or exonerate them, but you also have to prosecute the police officers in question.
I think the only thing that may be a problem, and I'm not sure if there's a statute that they can use to charge them with, if they're looking at perjury, for some reason, I think that it's 7 years. Mm-hmm. The statute of limitations for it, I believe. So that may be a problem. If there's any other charges that the DA can prosecute, or even if there's any federal charges, I'm not sure. But I think as far as statute of limitation, it may be up for certain crimes or charges.
All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes, Kareem Salam.
Walaikum salam, sir.
Okay, yes, brother. We all is in agreement, brother, that these police are out of order. And this is a racist society. America is a racist society of devils of the highest order. Elijah Muhammad speaks about the fall of America. And this is the fall of America. They know their time is up, brother, and they're trying to take out as many of our people as they can. The white man is the devil. He ain't never been civil. He never will be human. And my question to you, brothers, is this: where is Obama and the Inspector General Lynch? How in the hell can these crackers keep killing black people and they do nothing about it, and they're talking about this high level that they got to reach before they can bring these people to justice? But yet, still, my question is, what if they were Jews? What if they was white people? Do you think they'll have to reach that same level?
All right.
Y'all got a great show, brother. Keep doing a good job.
Thank you for your call, caller. And the question,
Yes, sir.
question regarding the Department of Justice, Obama, President Obama, is they MIA as it relates to the concerns of African American communities, especially as it relates to the abuse of law enforcement agencies throughout the country. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hello, Community Cop, Brother Ray Brooklyn. How you doing?
Hotep.
Julian, how y'all doing?
Hotep, brother.
Once again, state-sponsored terrorism. I tell you, I'm so pissed off again. But I'm going to tell you, I hope they were saying that initially it was a fight between a state woman and a black girl out there in Texas, and that initiated all this.
Right.
But when I actually saw what happened, let me tell you something. I don't care. I hope the rivers overflow that state. I hope the rivers overflow and drink them all out. I am so pissed off. I hope they flood that whole area. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your phone call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hotep Brothers calling from Harlem.
Hotep, brother.
Okay, the sound on my phone is very low, but I'll try to do the best I can.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, yeah, well, with the incident in Texas, obviously, I mean, you can see the cop was just running around like a maniac. And I don't know if you all showed this on the tape, but at one point he actually tripped and
That's
fell
correct.
while he was
Right.
running. And he was probably upset about that, so he just wanted to vent on somebody by getting physical. But another thing that I wanted to bring up is, this is kind of a different topic, but, well, kind of related, but Norman Seabrook, we really need to start calling people like that out, because he's on the radio from time to time, and he's always painting the corrections officers as if they do no wrong. And we know, at Rikers Island, they have a history of abusing people and roughing people up. In fact, there was just a young man who recently committed suicide because he was wrongly convicted and he was abused at Rikers Island. I don't know if you all know about that story. But lastly, and I know Brother Gray, I raised this issue a couple of weeks ago, and I know Brother Gray kind of said flat out no, but I think that if we start putting pressure on Obama, he might consider giving Mumia Abu-Jamal a pardon. Okay, 'cause we know he can do it, and we know that if we put pressure on him, he might at least take it into consideration.
All right.
Thanks, brothers.
Thank you for your call, caller.
Well, good luck, brother. I didn't say no in the sense. I'm just saying that he's not going to do it. Obama has stayed away from black issues, germane to our experience for the most part, and you're going to ask him to exonerate a black man accused of killing a cop in Philadelphia, from the Rizzo regime. It's not going to happen. They're dead set of killing him. They're trying to kill Mumia as we speak right now. And big shout out to Pam Africa and all those people who are fighting for Mumia's life. Much respect and Godspeed to all of you. So I would just say that, it's not going to happen. And so that I didn't say that, no, don't pursue it. I'm just saying that Obama is not going to, he's not going to do that.
All right. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Harlem, USA.
Okay, quick question or comment.
Yeah, so I think that part of the problem really is that there really isn't a consensus even within the black community that there is an institutional problem. And we know that sort of exists because we like to think that we live in a post-racial, world. And I think that that's part of the problem. We have to admit that the problem is institutional, and while we can acknowledge the situations that arise, we need to keep our focus on the institutional issue.
Right. That's right. White supremacy. Minister Farrakhan is on October 10th calling for the 20th anniversary of the Man March, and it's entitled Justice or Else. So I imagine we're going to hear a whole lot about, what you're just talking about, brother. White supremacy has been, is, and will continue to be the law of the land of the United States of America. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Did we lose your caller? Okay, Harlem, quick question or comment?
Yeah, maybe a brother could help me out. You know, every time it seems we have one of these atrocities occur to us, whether what happened in McKinney, Ferguson, his brother Eric Gardner. Where do these Negroes come out that always want to water it down and make it sound like, oh, black folks is jumping to a gun, it's not a racial thing and all this other stuff. You know, like every time I see a brother that basically been murdered, I don't care if it's by the hand of a police or a criminal or something like that. I see one of my brothers, I see myself, you know what I'm saying? It's like I can't help but somehow feel empathy toward that victim and whatnot. When I seen that little sister being wrestled to the ground, I have an 18-year-old daughter and whatnot. God help me if I would have been there and seen something like that. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I don't understand why we have to be so passive, because I've seen white folks and whatnot, the way they act toward the police when they feel like their rights are infringed, the last thing they doing is talking about yes sir and no sir. You know, this cop did what he did because they're conditioned to believe that black folks already been through all of this, so we already know the routine. You know, even in New York City and whatnot, they won't even read you your rights because they just assume you've been through this before. You know what I mean?
Excellent point, brother. Excellent point, brother. Thank you for your phone call as always. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next caller, you're on the air. All right, did we lose that call? We don't have the teleprompter. Next caller?
Hello there.
Yes, where you calling from, caller?
From Harlem.
Okay, quick question or comment?
My head is reeling of the re-election of Pat Lynch as president of your union. You got mostly people of color in the police force. Could you unpack that for me, please?
No, you don't have mostly people of color in the police force. Matter of fact, African Americans only represent probably about 13% of the police department. Probably less than that now. The police department has been, is, continue to be overwhelmingly white, especially when you have your police commissioner who said today that the reason why black armed police officers aren't getting into the police department because they have criminal records. This is the thoughts of a white supremacist who is now your police commissioner, who will have those kind of thoughts. Although law enforcement and corrections is 70% black, and school safety is probably 80% African American, and traffic, which are both under the New York City Police Department, like 80% African American. So African Americans want to become law enforcement officers, and they're allowed to become in these agencies. But there's always been a history of not allowing African Americans, the numbers of African Americans, to join the police department that's reflective of our population in the whole entire history of the New York City Police Department. Not only recently, since the 80s, in this entire history of the New York City Police Department, African Americans have never reflected, the number of police officers. So for the police commissioner to say that, that's what we have, brother, and it's from the top down.
And one of the things that people don't realize, these same police officers who are racist when they're police officers on patrol walking the beat, these are the police officers that become sergeants with the same mentality and the same way of operating. They become lieutenants, captains, chiefs, and they run the police departments. And their racial biases don't leave them as they go up in the rank. They continue to have more power and wield more power from a white supremacist racist mentality, and it affects the police department as a whole, and it affects the rank and file of the police officers and our community.
You know, unfortunately, there are situations where, even though in major cities, obviously, police unions are controlled by whites, but in quite a few major cities, the police department has black police chiefs. Here you have Chief Batts in Baltimore that has said that the reason why there has been a spike in crime in Baltimore is because when that CVS was destroyed, they invaded the pharmacy, and the pharmaceutical drugs that was used, they're all getting high off it. So he said he predicted for the next year they're going to be a spike in crimes because of the drugs that was taken from that one little CVS, and he claims that he needs federal help because of that spike in crime. Now, this is a black man that should have been fired a long time ago, as soon as the new mayor came in, because he sat over execution after execution, police officers just cold-bloodedly killing blacks, and he's still there now. He should be fired right away, and that type should be fired all over the country. So when we do have the power, unfortunately, it is only as an exponent of white supremacy and not reflecting black interests.
All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next caller.
Hello?
Where you calling from, caller?
The Bronx.
All right, the Bronx. Good question or comment?
Okay, the CVS officers were also, because there's a lawsuit by CVS security officers.
That's correct.
Were also ordered to follow and profile black people around their store. This suit is going on in New York right now.
Right.
I think the Baltimore DA made it possible for the guy down in Charleston to have the courage to indict Michael Slager, who shot Walter Scott. 8 times. Yeah, and Walter Scott 8 times in the back. The brother in the Bronx, who was jailed at Rikers, who committed suicide in the Bronx. His name was Khalif Browder.
Right.
And shout out to all the hardworking, dedicated teachers who are in the system educating our kids and to avoid those tic-tac criminalizations. When you see how used out there this summer, when you use the power in your hand with your Metro card, swipe them on.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
And just
Thanks for your
remember,
call, brother.
and just remember that he stayed in jail for close to 3 years.
Right.
Over supposedly stealing a backpack.
Yeah.
We're not talking about an oil field or a gold mine that white folks steal. We're only talking about a backpack, and it was delay after delay after delay. Set aside his court dates, and at the same time they kept telling him over the course of almost 3 years to cop out. And you can go home. And he did not want that on his record, so he refused to cop out to a crime that he didn't commit, and that's why he stayed in jail.
Right.
Young man standing for his conviction.
Right. All right.
Right.
Thank you for your call, but that unfortunately that's not the exception. That is the rule. There are literally thousands of individuals in jail because they have high bills, and the bail system is being abused in this state. It's punishment. It's not supposed to be to keep somebody in jail, incarcerated, it's to make sure that they do come back for a court date. So you have a whole lot of individuals that haven't been convicted of any crime, but are spending years, in jail. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next caller. All right, do we have a call on the line? Unfortunately, we're in the studio, so we don't have access to our teleprompter. And Michael, you bring up a good point with Chief Bates and that whole issue that's still going on over there. Some people claim that crime is inched up because police officers are afraid to do their job. And I say if officers are afraid to do their job, they should quit. If officers are arrested for rupturing the spine of an individual who's arrested, and this individual ultimately dies in their custody, and these officers are arrested, that should not deter any police officer from doing their job. I think that's just an excuse or just a ploy. Julian, I know you find that position to be preposterous, as well as here in New York City. If you do your job as a police officer, you shouldn't have to be worried about getting arrested or getting penalized or getting disciplined.
Sometimes I find trouble in saying this, but this isn't rocket science.
Right.
These guys, listen, do your job. Are things going to happen where you have to explain your actions? Absolutely. Then explain your actions. If you are doing your job fairly, impartially, and you're doing it without any biases, then I'm not going to say you're not going to have problems, because things happen. But for the most part, and when things happen, I'm talking about you have a corrupt police department that doesn't exist in any way. So sometimes things can go wrong because you got these people who have their own personal biases. But for the most part, you can at least try to navigate through some of the ills that may occur. But the bottom line is I have to concur with Noel. Everyone's not meant to be a police officer. If you are not willing to do the job, then don't do the job. Resign.
Well, I again say, this is not personal biases. This is white supremacy at its finest. These officers have developed a them and us attitude where they can actually see a travesty in plain sight. This man's spine was severed. And they've taken a position, if you're prosecuting him, then we're going to pull back because we in charge. That's sick. That's white supremacy. This has nothing to do with personal bias. This is the white man saying that if you're going to charge one of us for a nigger, then damn it, we'll pull back and we'll set up a situation where we'll watch you kill yourselves, then we'll blame it all on you. So this is the white man even the black cops who are encircled by the white man. This is nothing but white supremacy with a them and us strict attitude. There's no in between. They're taking a hardline position, and that's why that black chief, Bats, should start firing people left and right because they have a them and us attitude. They know there was a travesty of justice. I could see if it was borderline, then they should, as a union, make a move and say, look, this is wrong. But this is clearly, that man was upright and healthy before he was moved on by the police officers. After that, this man's life was systematically taken before the ride and during that ride. And for them to say, no, we're going to take a hardline position because how dare Mosby prosecute police officers for that action, then damn it, Bats should start firing.
That's right. And go in the black new community and rehiring. And when I look at the sympathy articulated in the white media, our officers, scared to do their job, blah, 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 et cetera, they should have the same posture that we just articulated here today. Fired. If you're afraid to do the job, fired. It's not volunteer work.
Right.
You're getting paid to do a job. You get a salary, you get benefits, you get pension plans. But we have some more phone callers. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Hello?
Yes, where you calling from?
Hey, what's up, brother? I'm calling from home.
Hotel, quick question, brother.
All right. I'm cool. Y'all fellas know anything about that thing that happened in Jersey with the rap riot? About the cops didn't want the kids to get in a concert? They had tickets, but the cops still didn't want to let them get in a rap concert.
Right. Yeah, there was, I seen on the news, probably I just know just what you know, that at the Summerfest, Summer Jam, Hot 97, there was skirmish and they just shut it down in terms of allowing people to come in. But thank you for your phone call, brother. Okay. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Hotel, where you calling from, brother?
Calling from New York City.
Okay, quick question.
All right, quick, I just wanted to make a comment. It seems to be as though our president has instituted the increase of white supremacy because he chooses not to act. Unfortunately, he's unable to act. And that's just the issue. But it seems as though since he's been in office, since he can't come to Harlem and speak to the brothers, since he can't go to black communities and speak to black people in their communities, that white supremacy has escalated because he knows there's no repercussion.
All right. Thank you for your phone call. And remember, I remember when Obama was first elected, I was happy about it, but I wasn't fooled that he was vetted. He's been chosen. They knew about Barack Obama before we knew Barack Obama. When you look at his policies throughout the world, he is the face of global white supremacy. He sends armies to assassinate and murder individuals in the third world at the bequest of powerful white men. So I'm not confused about who Obama works for. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Where you calling from, caller?
Yeah, Hotel.
Where you calling from?
I'm calling from home, brother.
Hotel, brother.
Listen, I noticed that you guys touched on the issue of Commissioner Bats out there in Maryland. I just was curious if your sentiment is the same that law enforcement officers like Philip Banks III and Rodney Harrison, Inspector Rodney Harrison, the NYPD, who shares the same mentality that we're all nothing but thugs and criminals, should they have been a part of the NYPD, and that you're happy that Inspector Harrison has been trenched from the 3-2 precinct, and Philip Banks III decides to resign. And I'll listen for your comment. I wonder if you feel like they shouldn't have never been, because they share that same mentality that all of us black people in Harlem are nothing but animals and thugs.
All right. Thank you for your phone call. I know Chase Banks, so I disagree with you that that's the way he feels. I know Rodney as well. I know you had an issue with Rodney. I've never been critical of your issue because I don't know about it, but I don't feel Rodney feels that way about the African American community either. Notwithstanding your particular situation.
Well, one thing that I do know, Rodney's the chief now, and what happens is, these guys work for the police department, and they do the will and the bidding of the police department. Now, I can't tell you what their psyches are, how they think, whether they think, they have a dislike or disdain for African people. I'm not saying that that's the case. And like Noel said, I know Phil Banks, and I could say personally, based on what I know about him, that's not how he feels. Are some of the choices that members of the police department make not in the best interests of our community at the time that they make them? That may be true. But I think that we have to hold individuals accountable for what they do when they do them in our community, and I don't think anybody should get a pass.
Right. All right. Closing comments, Julian.
Listen, man, we got a lot of work to do. You know, we're having this conversation. We're going to have the same conversation about someone else next month, next week, next year. We have a lot of work to do. Dad, I love you. Mom, I love you. Sis, I love you. Leader family, nothing but love for you. You know, we got work to do.
Nothing will be resolved without efforts on our part, even when you see clear injustices like we saw on the videotape. We have to be strong. We had a closed-door meeting with the Minister Farrakhan the other day, and he said justice or else. So we need to employ that, reinstate automatics.
Right. On behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our producers and engineers, Veronica Kidd, Nat Wood, Sheila Berry, and Nolan. See you next Tuesday. A little more. I love you. Knowledge is power. Don't forget, the greatest form of injustice on this planet today is white supremacy. If you're African American, you should fight against white supremacy wherever you can. See you next Tuesday, 5 o'clock. Knowledge is power. Peace. As Farrakhan said, justice or else. Are we off?